Hey everybody, Get the Lead out here, and today we're going to run through a bit of a tutorial on Editor on Fire and how to sync your beat map with Editor on Fire. Probably the single most important aspect of creating your custom song for Rocksmith. So definitely something you want to get right. So first things first, we'll start off by loading up our MP3, and we're going to use Johnny Winter's "Still Alive and Well." And the MP3 that we're starting with is of 320K quality. And if you do start with an MP3 that is of lesser quality, like 128 or 160K, you'd want to select whatever that encoder quality setting is, because we're creating the OGG and we want to use as high of, or at least I want to use as high of a quality setting as I can, but it's only as good as what your input is, your starting point. You can't make a higher quality OGG, just by selecting a higher quality setting. In any case, enough about that. I do want to thank, while this encodes the audio, thank RainBC for his great work on this tool, continuing to develop and support it. Without him, I certainly don't know where we'd be. So, with that being said, once you get the OGG file loaded, the first thing that I like to do anyway is hit the F5 key, and that will bring up a waveform graph for you to follow. And this is going to give you a bit of a visual aid as to what's going on in the audio. And you'll see that you can actually use this waveform graph to help you with the sync process. So looks like, based on the waveform graph, that maybe the first note kicks in right here about the 3-second mark. Maybe that's the downbeat. Let's give a quick listen and figure that out.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. So we've already got about 3 seconds of leading silence there. You want to have, realistically anywhere between maybe 3 and 5 seconds. So for argument's sake, we'll add another couple seconds of leading silence on that. So maybe we'll add 2 more milliseconds. Or I'm sorry, 2 seconds and 2,000 milliseconds, and we'll want to re-encode the audio for that. And just as that sounds, that's going to re-encode the OGG, just like we did a moment ago, but it's going to include that additional leading silence. So this way, when you go and use this audio later on, whether you're converting it with WWise to the WEM file, or you're maybe using something like Ultrastar Creator for your lyrics, you'll be using this audio with the longer leading silence, so everything is synced up with your project. Okay, and that will generate the new waveform automatically. Now from here, what you want to do is take this first beat marker right here and click and drag that over. And I will say probably the single biggest mistake that people make is, instead of, that sounds a little bit conceited, I guess, but the single biggest mistake that people do make when trying to sync their song is they're actually, they're going to try sliding the actual notes, back and forth to achieve synchronization, and they might be changing the BPM, the tempo, every so often to get the notes to sync up, and they might, select a couple and drag them around. That is, for so many reasons, not the most efficient way to do it. Certainly not the most accurate in a musical sense either. And the biggest reason being, each arrangement that you do that for, meaning each arrangement that you slide notes around for rather than change and move the beat map, you'll have to do that for each additional arrangement also. So you're creating a lot more work for yourself there, versus if you move the actual beats themselves, you'll have to do that only once, and then you can import your guitar profile for each arrangement, and it'll be in sync, just as it's in sync when you play back the guitar profile in Guitar Pro itself. So now that we've moved our first beat marker, we could check the guitar profile to see what the time signature is there. I can tell you it's 4/4 entirely through the song, which is helpful. Makes it a little bit easier. So you can, if you want, set this now, like so, and that'll make everything 4/4. And you'll notice that you'll see the downbeat of each measure is notated with a more solid white line. Now, right about here, you're at a crossroads. You can either decide to continue and sync the song without the notes from the guitar profile, or you can import them now. It makes really no difference. For argument's sake, for now, I'll show you what I mean by continuing on without the guitar profile. So what you're going to want to do when you sync your beat map is really, 99% of the time, only touch the first beat marker, the first beat of each measure. There's not going to be too much need to, in the vast majority of cases, to move these, second, third, and fourth beats at all, unless there's a musical instance where mid-measure, the song slows down like a, sort of dramatic, rock and roll ending kind of thing. Then, you may want to move these individually as the song gets slower or faster. Mid-measure. But in the majority of cases, like I said, you can just drag the first beat marker like so. And in most rock songs, you'll start to notice patterns in the beat map, and you'll certainly get better at identifying those patterns the more that you do this. But you'll start to notice patterns, particularly with the drum part, as oftentimes that will create the biggest, splash, so to speak, in the waveform. A lot of times with rock and roll drum beats, you'll see snare drum hits on the second and fourth beats of each measure, so that will give you a pretty prominent little spike like this right here. So if we listen to this, you're probably going to hear a snare there and there. I'm not sure how standard this drum beat is to start. It might be a little bit jazzy with triplets and such, but you'll see what I mean when we play this back. And what I can also do, what you can do as well, to give you a further audio aid, is you can hit the M key, and that will turn on the metronome, and it'll give you metronome clicks as each one of these beats passes by upon the playback. So let's play back maybe up to the end of the third measure here so you can see what I mean. Did you ever take a look and see left around? So you get the idea. You hear not only the clicks, but you hear the snare drum hits. So that's going to be a visual cue for us as we continue to sync the song. So you're going to again continue on just dragging the first beat marker, and you'll see it lines up quite nicely. In this particular case, it might be that the drummer is maybe a little bit off time, just kind of the start of the song. It doesn't line up perfectly, but as long as we play it back and the metronome sounds like it's in sync, then we should be good to go. Did you ever take a look and see left around? Everyone. Actually, I'm a little bit off myself. I think the last beat is a little bit more back here than anything. So let's see what that sounds like. There we go. That's a little bit better. And this spike right here is actually from the vocals themselves. So basically, you just continue on that very same process of clicking and dragging the beats along. Like so, for the rest of the song. Now, what I can also show you is if you prefer to import the guitar profile, before starting any of this, we'll do that now. So I can show you what that looks like too, because there's some additional things that you can use in doing that to help you. So we'll import the guitar profile here, and if you want, you can select yes here, and it will use whatever the time signatures are that are already present in the guitar profile. This particular song is simple enough. It's all in 4/4, so it doesn't really matter whether we choose this or not because we've already selected 4/4 as our time signature. But 9 times out of 10 you can get away with clicking yes on that one. That will help you. But if the time signatures in the guitar profile are wrong, then you may want to edit those manually. Or not use not click yes, in that case. Totally up to you. And same with this. I know I usually prefer to set the section markers and phrases and such manually myself later on. You can also select yes, and that will import the ones present in the guitar profile for you. Pretty straightforward. So we're now importing the guitar track. And well, it looks like there's an additional measure of, I didn't look at this, but an additional measure of leading silence in there. So what that will do is make it a little bit off sync. So the guitar actually starts right here. So the guitar profile must be taking into consideration this kind of count-in measure. 3, 4. As an actual measure. So from here we have two options. We can either, hit Control A and Control C, and then delete all that, and then skip rather to the first beat marker using the page up and page down keys. You see the green marker is exactly on the first beat. Whenever you do that, it will snap exactly to the beat, and then you can just hit Control V to copy everything that you had on your clipboard, and that's that. You would also need to do that with any tech notes as well. If you hit the F4 key, you'll see some tech notes there that need to be moved back a measure also. So you'd repeat the same process. For argument's sake, we can make it a little bit easier on ourselves and just we've only synced a couple of beats thus far. So let me just hit Control Z. And get rid of that, like so, and we can just move these back, and then just resync the first couple of beats like we already did, and that one falls right on it already. Now you'll notice as we get further into the song that there's going to be a bit of variation. You see here about 91 beats per minute, about 92 beats per minute in the next measure, and so on. This particular song was recorded, I think, in 1973 or something like that. So they didn't have the fancy studio equipment that we have today, where you can actually after the recording process make a consistent BPM throughout the song, and make it seem as though you stayed perfectly on tempo the entire recording. Anything mid 80s or more modern may have that technology inherent in it. You'll know that pretty quickly when you start syncing. If it looks exactly the same, you can decide to manually select a BPM. And so, for example, this one's maybe about 93 as a BPM. So make it a little bit easier on ourselves so we don't have to drag things so far. We can change this to 93, and that will change every subsequent measure to 93 to give us maybe a little bit better of a starting point for our sync. And as we move these, we'll only have to move them a little bit. All you need to do for that, once again, is just click on the beat marker there, and then change it to whatever you like in the BPM. So in our case, we can continue on. Now sometimes you can get away with dragging instead of each measure, maybe every other measure, and that will work as long as measure A is about the same as measure B in terms of tempo. Then you'll see that it will sync up. We'll give a quick listen just to make sure that that's the case here. On the ground. They're trying to get me lost of time, and now they're coming out. So yeah, I mean that's pretty in sync. Not to be confused with the 90s band. The boy band. In any case, it looks like maybe this one, this next measure doesn't quite do that. So we want to maybe slide that middle one over just a little bit. Now, actually, what I forgot to do was re-import our Guitar Pro arrangement. So I can show you something else that's a bit of a tool in the syncing process. And that's called the clap function. That's not in any way a reference to the venereal disease of the same moniker. This is a actual clapping sound that you can turn on by hitting the C button of all things, and each time a note goes by during playback, it will make the clapping sound for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you hear we still have the metronome on also. Maybe I'll turn that off just so you can hear strictly the clapping noise. So yeah, that's also a cue for you to use if you want to import the guitar profile and then use the sync, sync the song after that. I personally like to do it without the guitar or without the guitar notes kind of in the way. I find it just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more difficult because I like to sync it visually. So in that case, you can always go to a track that's not being utilized at all, like a bass track, and just follow the waveform, and continue on in syncing the song, like just slide everything over about like this, maybe about right there, and actually right about there, and so on, and continue that. One additional tool that you can use, which probably very few people do, but it is helpful, is the spectrogram. And I forget where it is because I do not use it very much myself. Where are right about there? So to give you an idea, actually there's a very good tutorial on the spectrogram. I believe it's a tutorial. I think I remembered seeing on Customs Forge by Albatross123 about how to use this spectrogram to sync the song. For me, since my laptop is a little bit older and, admittedly probably on its way out, the playback function doesn't work so well when I have the spectrogram on because it's a little bit more resource intensive than just the waveform. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. However, I'm not well versed in how this works, but basically the colors indicate certain things, and you can read up on this yourself. But you can turn that off and on at your discretion. But really, that's about it. All you need to do is just continue through the rest of the song in dragging the beat markers along, and you'll be good to go. So what I can do to give you an idea of about how long this takes is I can hit the pause button real quick and just note the time, about 7:33, and then I can finish the rest of the song. It's probably only going to take a couple of minutes, just to give you an idea of how quick this is. And actually, one thing I should have led with earlier on is this certainly isn't the only way to sync your beat map. A lot of people use Go Play Along, for example. That is a little bit more automatic in the way that it will sync the beat map for you, and then you would just export that out to be used here in Editor on Fire, export the result out. However, you do need the pro version, the paid for version of Go Play Along for that, and Brooklyn Sounds has a great tutorial on how to use Go Play Along to this purpose. I myself like to do everything in Editor on Fire, partly because this was the first way that I learned, and also because I like to, I'm kind of a control freak. I like to do everything manually and hands-on as much as I can and not rely on an automated process. But that's just me. You might find that Go Play Along works for you better than this. But in any case, that's an option for you also. So in the interest of time, just note that 7:34. I'm going to continue through the rest of the song here, and we'll see where we get. Okay, so you can see, about 3-4 minutes later, we are just about all set. Now there's, at the very end of the song, there's one of those good, good fun rock and roll endings, where kind of a free time ending. So there might be some, some more difficult changes to the beat map in syncing this at the end. Let's listen and see what we can figure out. Alive and well. So really here we have some options. What we're probably going to want to do, same as before, is if at all possible, sync this just with the beats themselves. So we've already anchored here, either by moving or dragging this, or clicking on the beat itself and hitting the A button will anchor this in place. And then maybe we can drag this to right about here, and maybe since that last note is right about there, something like that. Maybe that sounds a little bit better. Let's listen. So sounds like maybe this is a little bit quicker here. Now, in a case like this where you really want to listen to it closely, you can actually slow down the playback by going here to Edit and Playback Rate, and maybe slow this down to maybe 50% or so. So you can really hear, and see where the notes come in. Maybe something like this. And this is actually a lot more resource intensive. So sometimes you might notice you'll have to rewind or play and pause to get it to really sync. So maybe even a little bit further ahead for this measure, and a little bit further ahead for this one. And you can just continue to tweak this a little bit, further as needed. And then, if need be, you can always move, this beat marker and so forth to get this part right. But really, that's as complicated of a situation as you're going to come across. The actual sync itself, you can see it took me 3 or 4 minutes to run through, and I'll just give you an idea of what that's going to look like. As I'll put it back to normal speed here. Well, we'll assume that the guitar profile is mostly correct, so we'll see. Still alive, well. Every now and then I know it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm still alive, well. Still alive, well. You know I'm still alive, well. Every now and then I know it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm still alive, well. So yeah, all in all, not a bad looking guitar profile. Going to be a little bit of editing required, maybe adding some hammer-on techniques and changing things up a little bit. I won't delve into that now as we've gone on long enough, but that basically concludes the syncing process. Maybe we'll leave some of those techniques and a guide to shortcuts and manual editing with Editor on Fire to a different tutorial. But that's basically it. I hope I've covered everything and I don't feel that I've missed something after the fact, but I'll be posting this, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, or if you'd be so kind as to like it, if it was helpful to you, all the better. But if you have any further questions on this process, feel free to ask a question in the comments, and I'll certainly do my best to answer. And anyone else in the community that sees it and has an answer as well can help you out. Hopefully this was a good alternative to some of the misinformation that's out there on how to if you want to call it the proper way to sync your beat map with Editor on Fire. You definitely don't want to be going and dragging, can't reiterate this enough, dragging the actual notes around if at all possible. There are some instances where the tab might be wrong where you may want to do that, and if so, make sure you're using the grid snap function to keep the musicality of it intact. But 9 times, certainly 99 times out of 100, you're just going to want to sync everything as I did, using the beats themselves and sliding those around. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I hope this was helpful to you, and have a great day, guys. Cheers.